All right, Metaverse time. We're
Oh,
going deep on this one today. I've been seeing all your articles and videos you've sent me, so I know you're pretty into this whole like 3D internet thing.
yeah. Yeah, definitely.
It seems like everyone is, to be honest. There's just so much hype around it.
Yeah.
So that's why we're doing this deep dive, right? Trying to cut through all that noise and figure out what it even means for us, like what the metaverse actually looks like in 2025.
Totally, yeah. And it's really interesting because a lot of people were thinking the metaverse would just be like this one big virtual world, like,
Yeah.
one single thing. But that's not really what's happened. It's become way more about these like distinct immersive experiences like tailored to different purposes.
Yeah, it's less about like escaping reality and more about enhancing it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm thinking of that article you sent me, that virtual concert in Fortnite. Thousands of people all experiencing a live show together, like no matter where they were physically. It makes you wonder if that kind of shared experience could even create a stronger sense of connection than, I don't know, just watching a video on your own.
It's a really good question. And, researchers are actually starting to look into that now.
Wow.
Because it is possible these shared virtual experiences can tap into like a deeper level of empathy and social bonding.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
And on top of that, the metaverse isn't just limited to those like kind of clunky VR headsets anymore. You
Yeah.
can actually access these experiences on, your computer, your phone, even with AR glasses.
So it's becoming much more accessible.
Exactly.
That's key because it used to seem like to even try out the metaverse,
Mhm.
you needed like, I don't know, a top-of-the-line gaming setup.
Yeah, total.
But what about blockchain and NFTs? Those were supposed to be like the bedrock of the metaverse.
Right, there was so much hype around that at first.
Right.
But I think now what we're seeing is people are taking like a more strategic approach, like being more choosy about how to integrate them.
Okay, so less slapping an NFT onto everything
Yeah.
and more like being intentional with how you use them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you give me an example of where that's actually working, like this targeted approach?
Yeah. You know that article you highlighted about digital ownership in gaming?
Oh, yeah.
Think about that. In traditional games, you don't actually own the items you buy or earn.
You just have a license to use them.
Exactly. But with NFTs, you could actually own those digital assets.
Whoa.
You could trade them, sell them.
It's like having real ownership.
Right. It's this whole new level of control, and it's potentially valuable for gamers.
Totally. It's about like shifting the power dynamic
Yeah.
and giving users more, I don't know, autonomy over their digital lives.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've talked about access and a bit about like the tech behind it all.
Mm-hmm.
But let's actually talk about the potential advantages of the metaverse.
Yeah.
Beyond just the cool factor, like where it could really make a difference.
Well, like you mentioned earlier, remote work has become such a big part of our lives.
It has.
And the metaverse could actually revolutionize how we connect with colleagues remotely, how we collaborate.
Okay, so like more than just another Zoom meeting, because let's be honest,
Right.
video calls get old.
Totally. Exactly. So instead of just staring at these little boxes on a screen,
Yeah.
imagine you could collaborate in shared 3D workspaces, right? Like you could walk around, you could interact with objects, and get an actual sense of presence.
You wouldn't feel so far apart from your colleagues.
Yeah. And it's not just replicating the physical office. Think about immersive training.
Oh, wow.
New employees could learn the ropes in a virtual version of the workplace.
So they can make mistakes without, actually messing anything up.
Exactly. It reduces errors, speeds up training. It could be a huge change.
That's super cool. And it reminds me of something else that I thought was really interesting in the articles you sent, like the potential of the metaverse
Yeah.
for education and training in general.
Definitely.
I was reading about medical students using VR to practice surgery
Mm.
and history students like virtually exploring ancient Rome. It's like
Mhm.
stepping into a textbook.
That level of immersion can be so powerful for learning.
Yeah.
Because, it's one thing to read about the Colosseum, but it's a completely different thing to like actually walk through it virtually, see how big it is, how grand it is firsthand.
Wow.
And then think about the potential for fields like engineering, architecture, things like that.
Yeah.
Instead of just looking at blueprints, students could interact with 3D models. They could, see problems, try out solutions, all in this virtual environment.
It's a sandbox for learning. It
Exactly.
encourages you to experiment, to play around.
And let's not forget the creative side of things, too.
Well,
All the new forms of entertainment you could have, interactive concerts, virtual art galleries.
that's so cool.
It's a whole new canvas for artists, for creators to play around with.
It's like a wild west of creativity,
Totally.
where the only limit is like your own imagination.
Mm-hmm.
But with any new frontier, like there are going to be some challenges
Oh, absolutely.
alongside all those opportunities.
And we have to be honest about those challenges if we actually want to build a metaverse that, benefits everyone.
Right, because it's easy to get caught up in all the hype and overlook the potential downside.
Totally.
So let's get into that. What are some of the big concerns you're seeing?
I think one of the most pressing ones is privacy, data security.
Mm.
Like, we're talking about levels of data collection that honestly are bigger than anything we've ever seen before.
Wow.
Every movement, every interaction, even like where you look, could potentially be tracked and analyzed in the metaverse.
That's a little scary, honestly.
It is, yeah. So we have to make sure that this data is handled responsibly and that users actually have control over their own information.
It's a really good point. And it's not even just about the data we're like intentionally sharing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You sent me an article about the potential for emotion tracking tech in VR, and that was just honestly kind of unsettling.
Yeah.
Like the idea that your feelings, your reactions could be monitored.
And potentially manipulated.
Exactly.
That's a huge concern.
It really is. And then that brings up the even bigger question of like, who controls the metaverse?
Mm-hmm.
Will it be this decentralized space where users have like autonomy and agency? Or will it be dominated by like a few big corporations or even governments?
Yeah, that's something we need to think about.
Yeah, it feels like we're at a crossroads.
Definitely.
We can either build a metaverse that like empowers individuals and helps people connect,
Mm-hmm.
or, we could end up in a digital dystopia where everything we do is tracked and controlled.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations now before, it's too late.
Before it's too ingrained in our lives to change. So we've talked about potential, the downsides, and, who's in charge. But what's actually happening in the metaverse right now?
Yeah, good question.
Like, what are some real-world examples of how it's being used?
That's where things get really interesting because while, it's still early, we're already seeing some fascinating things happening.
Okay, let's dive into those. Where should we start?
Well, we were just talking about all those worries around, data privacy and corporate control.
Right.
And it's funny because we're actually seeing those concerns play out right now with platforms like Meta's Horizon Worlds.
Oh, yeah, Horizon Worlds, that was huge when it launched.
It was.
Seemed like Zuckerberg was betting big on it being the metaverse platform.
Right.
But from the articles you sent me, it sounds like, I don't know, things haven't really gone the way they planned.
Yeah, it's true. Even with all the resources Meta's put into it,
Right.
Horizon Worlds is struggling to get people using it. Some critics are saying it's just like the interface is clunky, there's not enough engaging content, and, you need that expensive VR headset just to even use it.
Right, so accessibility and user experience are still big problems.
They are, yeah.
It's a good reminder that even with all the money in the world,
Yeah.
building a metaverse experience that people actually want to use, it's not easy.
It's really not. And it shows how important it is to understand what people actually want, like what they need from these virtual spaces. It can't just be about fancy graphics and tech.
Yeah.
It's about creating experiences that are fun and engaging, things that actually add something to people's lives.
Okay, so Horizon Worlds might be struggling a bit,
Mm-hmm.
but what about those gaming platforms we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Like Fortnite and Roblox. It seems like they're having more success with, I don't know, weaving in those metaverse elements.
Yeah, they are. And, it's super interesting how those platforms are really blurring the lines between, like, what's a game and what's a virtual world. We've seen, huge artists having concerts in Fortnite, brands launching products in Roblox.
I even saw an article about a fashion show happening in a game.
Totally. And it's not just entertainment either.
Right. I remember reading about companies using these platforms for team building and even virtual conferences.
Exactly.
So it seems like they're reaching a much wider audience than, just your typical gamer.
For sure, yeah. And it just shows how versatile these platforms are. They're
Yeah.
constantly changing, adapting to what users want. They're not just these static games anymore.
Right.
They're dynamic virtual spaces where people can connect, they can create.
It makes you wonder, like, in the future, will we even need separate platforms for work, for fun, for socializing?
Right.
Maybe it'll all just be in these, like, shared virtual spaces.
That's a really interesting thought.
It is.
And it also makes you think about, what companies like Microsoft are doing,
Right.
developing these metaverse platforms specifically for work. Like we were talking about Microsoft Mesh earlier.
Yes. Microsoft Mesh. And there was another one, spatial, right?
Yes.
Also for businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading about the potential for 3D design review and brainstorming in these virtual spaces, and it sounds really cool.
It is. What's cool about platforms like Mesh and Spatial is that they're taking those work tasks that we all kind of dread,
Oh, yeah.
like conference calls, presentations,
The worst.
and they're making them way more interactive, engaging in a way that you just couldn't do in real life.
That's like, instead of just looking at a flat blueprint,
Right.
you can actually walk through a 3D model of a building with your colleagues.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can point out problems, you can brainstorm ideas, like all together in real time.
Mm.
That's way better than just staring at a screen all day.
Totally. And it shows how the metaverse can actually offer practical solutions for businesses, especially, companies that have teams all over the world.
Right.
It helps break down those geographical barriers and create a sense of connection that can be hard to find otherwise.
Okay, so we've got entertainment, we've got work, but I'm really excited about the potential for education and training.
Oh, for sure.
You sent me some amazing articles about platforms like Engage and VRedo
Yes.
that are already using VR to create immersive learning experiences.
They're doing such great work.
I know.
Yeah.
Transforming how we learn by making it fun, interactive.
Yeah, exactly.
You were talking about medical students practicing surgery, history students going to ancient Rome.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just limited to those fields, is it?
Not at all. Imagine, learning about the human body by walking through a giant 3D model of a heart.
Wow.
Or, studying astrophysics by flying through the solar system.
That'd be incredible.
Possibilities are endless.
It's taking these abstract concepts and making them real,
Hmm.
something you can experience. And I bet that helps people actually learn and remember things better.
Oh, definitely.
And think about the possibilities for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Or people in remote areas. The metaverse could give them access to education that they might not have otherwise.
For sure. It could be a huge step forward for making education more accessible and inclusive.
That's a great point.
And these are just a few examples of how people are using the metaverse right now.
It's amazing.
We're seeing virtual events, marketing campaigns, therapy sessions, even religious services.
Wow. It really is branching out into all these different areas.
It is, and it's evolving so quickly.
It is. But I think it's important to step back and think about, where does the metaverse fit in the big picture?
Mm-hmm.
How does it relate to the internet as we know it?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And, I think it's important to emphasize that the metaverse isn't meant to replace the internet.
Okay.
It's not about abandoning the 2D web, the one we use every day.
So it's not a complete shift, but more like an evolution.
Exactly.
Okay.
So think of the internet as the foundation, that 2D layer where we get information, communicate, do business.
So then the metaverse is like a 3D layer on top of that.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's the immersive web, the one where you can actually experience things.
Right. So it's the difference between reading about a place and actually going there.
Yeah. Or like watching a video of a concert versus being in the crowd.
I get it. It's about adding a whole other dimension to our digital lives.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how it all fits together now, but as we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I'm curious. So much to think about, but I think it's time to, bring it back to the listener.
Yeah.
Like, what does this all mean for them, in their lives right now?
That's the big question, right? Because we talk about the metaverse as this future thing, but it's already kind of weaving its way into our everyday lives.
Yeah.
I think you might even be surprised by how much you're interacting with metaverse type tech without even realizing it.
Okay, how so? Like, give me an example.
Well, okay, imagine you're redecorating your living room.
Okay.
Instead of just looking at furniture websites, you could put on an AR headset and
Yeah.
actually see how that new sofa would look in your space.
Oh, so you could virtually place it in your room.
Yeah. See different configurations.
I've seen ads for apps that do that,
Yeah.
but I always thought it was more of a gimmick.
Some of them might be, sure, but the tech is getting so much better so fast.
I guess so.
And think about it. It's not just furniture, right? Imagine trying on clothes virtually before you buy them.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Or taking a virtual tour of a vacation rental to get a real feel for the place.
Oh my gosh, that would have saved me from so many bad hotel bookings.
Right. It's like bridging the gap between online and offline.
Totally.
And it's not just convenience. It's making our experiences better, more engaging.
Yeah, I get that.
Remember that article about that museum with the VR exhibit?
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
You weren't just looking at things, you were interacting with them.
Yeah, it was like A whole new way to learn.
It makes you want to learn more, explore more.
It does. Who wouldn't want to, like, virtually explore Pyramid or meet a pharaoh?
Exactly. And then there's the potential for connecting with people, all over the world.
Oh, remember we were talking about the metaverse maybe causing social isolation? Well, it could actually do the opposite.
Yeah, like instead of replacing real-world interaction, it could add to it.
Exactly. You could, I don't know, take a cooking class with friends from different countries or have a book club where you can all see and interact with each other.
That'd be so
And
fun.
as the tech gets even better, who knows what we'll be able to do?
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Maybe we'll have concerts where you can feel the energy of the crowd or virtual travel that's so real you forget you're not actually there.
It's kind of mind-blowing and a bit scary, to be honest.
It is, because it feels like we're at the start of something huge.
We are.
But we have to be careful about the downsides, too.
Right, like we were saying before.
Data privacy, content moderation, all that stuff. Those are big issues that we can't ignore.
It's like they say, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
We have to be really careful about how we use this tech.
We do, and that's where you come in, the listener.
What can they do? The future of the metaverse isn't set in stone. It's being shaped right now by the choices we make.
So we all have a part to play.
We do. The conversations we have, what we expect from the companies that are building it, it all matters.
So what's the most important thing listeners can do to make sure the metaverse goes in a good direction?
Learn, stay informed, keep up with the technology, what it can do, the risks, all of it.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more you know, the better decisions you can make.
That's true.
And don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge people, demand that these companies are transparent.
We can't just be passive consumers.
No, we have to be involved in shaping this new world.
So, as we wrap up this whole deep dive into the metaverse, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
The metaverse is more than just technology. It's a social experiment, a cultural moment. It reflects our hopes and our fears for the future.
It does.
It's up to all of us to make sure it lives up to its potential, that it becomes something good.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this exploration, everyone.